Hello, I'm John Nicolson. Thank you for joining me on my YouTube channel. I thought today we would talk about the tragedy that's unfolding in the Middle East. Not just the terrible destruction of Gaza, but the ongoing quasi-war between Israel and Iran. As I record this, Donald Trump has returned early from the G7 summit. He's in the Situation Room in Washington, D.C. at the White House, and he's planning what he is going to do next. Meanwhile, there are air raid sirens across Tel Aviv, indicating that more Iranian missiles are about to be fired or are en route. And of course, there has been terrible death and destruction in Iran, with not just Iranian officials, scientists, and military officers killed, but innocent civilians as well. So how is it all going to unfold? Well, it's clear that Netanyahu wanted armed conflict, because we were scheduled to have talks between Iranian officials and the Americans over Iran's potential nuclear threat. Those talks were scheduled, and Netanyahu wanted to make sure that he scuppered them. And he's been successful in that aim. So he doesn't want peace. He almost certainly wants a protracted conflict, and he may want regime change. Now, nobody, I think, would be unhappy to see the awful regime in Tehran toppled. But that, it seems to me, is a job for the Iranian people. We've learned bitterly how disastrous our interventions are in the Middle East. We saw that in Iraq, and we've seen it elsewhere. We've seen it in Libya as well. This has to be a matter for the Iranians. Now, Donald Trump's utterances on the issue, and it's at moments like this that, again, I can't help but feel desperately sad that Donald Trump is the person in the White House, a man with no knowledge of the world, with no common sense, no wisdom, spewing nonsense at the cameras. And this morning he's been asked about whether or not Iran was close to developing a nuclear weapon, which nobody wants. And his national security boss testified recently before Congress that Iran was nowhere near having nuclear weapons. But Donald Trump said today on Air Force One that Iran was about to develop nuclear weapons. Well, what's the point of having a national security team if you're going to ignore their intelligence briefings? And it all has that awful echo of the build-up to war against Iraq. Remember, Saddam Hussein was building a nuclear weapon. We were told that he'd be able to send missiles and hit Cyprus. All lies. All nonsense. So a different situation from Iran, because we know that Iran has a nuclear program, but that's different from having nuclear weapons. And what the American intelligence community has said is that they are 3 or 4 years away from having any kind of nuclear weapon. And crucially, what we should be doing in that time is what we were planning to do, which is have talks between the Americans and the Iranians and de-escalate. Talks. That was the way forward. That's what was planned, and that's what the Israelis were determined to scupper. So what are Trump's options? Well, he almost certainly wants to see the Iranians capitulate. And that may, of course, be an option, because there seems to be a lessening over the last 24 hours of the number of weapons being fired into Israel by Iran. And I've been listening to the military experts and the analysts, and they're all saying the same thing, which is Iran may well be running out of weapons. And of course, Iran will not want to enter into talks feeling that it's been cornered and that it's only talking because it's running out of weapons. And so they may want to negotiate now from a position of strength. They've shown that they can hit Israel, and previously the Israeli public was told that an iron dome protected their airspace, and that has been shown not to be correct. But Trump has an additional problem. And it is this: he ran in his election campaign promising that under his presidency, there would be no intervention in foreign wars. It was the American first philosophy, if you can call it a philosophy. He said that he would never have allowed the Iraqi war to start, that he wouldn't have got engaged elsewhere in the Middle East, that he would not send any troops to Ukraine, but would solve the conflict on day one. And you've got to remember that a lot of the folk who died in the various wars under George Bush, for example, were the poor, the badly educated, often rural voters whose sons and brothers went off, fought and died in conflicts like Afghanistan, which delivered absolutely nothing to them. So there's been a real sense, and they're the Trump voters, many of them, so there's been a real sense that under his presidency, one good thing might be delivered for the MAGA voters, the Make America Great Again Republican voters, you know, the folk who wear Donald Trump's red hats. And what they were promised and what they hoped for was no more foreign wars, but a focus on America and on poverty and on improving infrastructure and healthcare, all the things that Donald Trump promised. So if he decides to get involved in the Israeli-Iranian war, he will be breaking a promise to those voters, and he will be roundly criticized for it. So that's a real big problem for him, because people think he's an idiot, and in many ways he is, but he's got a keen political sense of what his supporters want, and they don't want him to get involved in Israel's war against Iran. Meanwhile, we hear from Keir Starmer that perhaps the UK could be involved in defending Israel. It is the last thing that we should be doing. This morning again, there has been more carnage in Gaza as food deliveries were fired upon as desperate people crushed forward to try and get supplies for their family. The Israelis look as if they've killed another 50 innocent civilians. War crimes. The United Kingdom should be involved in only one way, and that is helping prosecute Netanyahu and his cronies for war crimes. We shouldn't be getting involved in defense of Israel, and we should certainly not be sending any more weapons or weapons parts to Israel. The history books will not be kind to Keir Starmer for how he has behaved throughout this conflict. So today, I'm sorry, a depressing video. We have ourselves a tragedy in Gaza. We have bombs dropping on innocent civilians in Tel Aviv. We have bombs dropping as well in Tehran. We have an unstable American president who's expected to take decisions and use wisdom that he doesn't have. The world looks like a much more dangerous place today, and the quality of leadership both in the UK and the US is woeful. Thank you for listening. As always, I'll be delighted to hear your comments. I'll be delighted to answer any questions that you might have. Please do subscribe. It doesn't cost anything at all. And thank you very much for watching.